You did it, kid. You're noticing things are starting to get a little bit more feminine. People aren't clocking tea like they used to. Started as a bottom, now we're here. All right, I'll stop, sorry. Wanting to be accepted into society is perfectly normal. Some might even say primal. The need for social inclusion comes right under food and shelter, because if you couldn't make it with the pack, you would be out on your own and you would, Common stance I hear from an overwhelmingly large number of trans women is that they don't owe anybody anything. I'm with you. Why should we miss out on opportunities others are afforded just because we didn't align with our gender at birth? But a wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. Benjamin Franklin Parker. Unquote. So in today's video, I wanted to dissect the idea that maybe some techniques you've learned to survive are actually preventing you from the ability to thrive. But before I lose my audience retention, can I get that damn intro?
Can I help you?
Good morning. Can I get a large caramel macchiato, hot with whole milk, please?
Hot or cold?
Hot, please. I appreciate you. Thank you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good to see you all. Can you believe 2 weeks ago when I started uploading content, I had 5 subscribers, and I checked this morning, we are now at like 197 last I checked. Hopefully by 200 by the time this video uploads. You're asking how that makes my morning feel? Well, I gotta tell you, fam, pretty damn good. It is such a beautiful day that I figured that, I wanted to go out and get some fresh air, so I decided we would do some sightseeing, show y'all around, and then we'll go home and we'll talk about it, All right. Where I go when I want to think sometimes, although I don't know why. This is where kids used to go on Friday nights in high school to make out, but of course nobody ever wanted to make out with me, which is fine. I would just drink 4 Locos and throw up all over myself. It's a good time. Now that I say that out loud, it actually becomes less of a mystery as to why no one wanted to make out with me. Although I would say, as an adult, I've gone up in front of a lot of men who wanted to proceed to make out with me. Maybe they're just more concerned with cooties back then. Maybe it's female privilege, I don't know. So, the weather has gotten progressively bad. But y'all know I'm anything for views. Also, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to use any of this footage because it's windy up here, so. This is Bill, Buffalo Bill, very cute. Legend has it, you're supposed to throw change on there and make a wish. I wish that everyone who was ever mean to me has a lot of children, gets really fat, and never gets to sleep in. Oh. Ever recall a point in my early transition where I asked myself if I wanted to live stealth or if I wanted to be open about being trans? I guess I just kind of assumed that's what you did if you were able to do so. So I kind of always strived for that earlier on in my transition, and it really became an insecurity of mine. I was constantly paranoid everywhere I went, whether if it was at a party or a friend's house, meeting new people, going to the grocery store. It was like a crippling anxiety for me. I remember distinctively when I sat down and decided that I was gonna pursue this path for myself. and I was going over the statistics, and everyone that I had met was just living a lifestyle that just didn't seem something I wanted to do. And I asked myself, I was like, did this work out for like anybody? And I promised myself that if I was to go through with this, if I was to transition, I would do it to better my life. And somewhere in the middle of that, it just didn't feel better. I want to talk about vulnerability for a second. When you have a secret inside of yourself that you're ashamed of, people can definitely sense it. Did you know about 90% of communication is through tone and body language? Oh, really? Oh, really? Notice how the same sentence can give different context. I know, you're like, hey, Charlotte, where are you going with this? But bear with me for a second, okay? I could never get into the mind of a cis person and understand the feeling it must be to not think of gender in an everyday, every circumstance basis, right? Likewise, they could never understand that it is in every little thing that I do in my life. It's like gender is always there. It's kind of like when you learn about a new car and then you see them like everywhere when you never saw it before. Our mind has a way of taking information and fishing it out into our surroundings, right? I say this because a lot of trans women will say, well, no, it's not that I'm hiding it. I just don't want to bring it up at first because it's nobody's business. And I used that to justify living stealth for a good portion of my earlier 20s. And I gotta tell you, with it being something that was always on my mind, but I refused to bring it up, even though it was the very fiber of who I was. To be honest, living as a stealth trans woman began to feel more of a lie than living as a gay male ever did. Let me tell you what, my two biggest struggles in my life thus far is being trans and also being a millennial. We live in a time where everybody has a platform, right? And they have control of their narrative or to show you what they want to see. Losing control of that narrative is the most vulnerable and out of control feeling you will ever have in your entire life, in millennial terms. I've always had this inferiority complex kick in when it came to cis people because I had this idea that everybody like knew what they were doing, right? And they were just confident and knew how to like function in life, and I was just the like dumbass who didn't know how to even like introduce myself to somebody. So the way I've always based my life is by trial and error. So quick story time, I had gotten a job waiting tables, and I just had this hypothesis because being outed or not being able to maintain my like stealth ability in some ways told me that I failed, that everything that I've invested in these past couple of years I failed at, and it was just the biggest fear I had. So I decided I was going to start waiting tables, and at this job I was going to be completely open about my status. It was absolutely petrifying for me, but I really reasoned with myself and I said, okay, listen, if it really goes horribly bad and you become, you know, like a victim of bullying or harassment on a day-to-day basis at your job, you can just quit and you can just move on and never talk to these people again and, you know, potentially move states. It was really serious for me. So I started working at this job, and in the middle of conversations, I would just find ways to say, oh yeah, back before I transitioned, back when I was a boy, and I would get these kind of looks, right? And then they would expect me to go further with that, and I wouldn't. I'd just be like, that, gotta go to my table now. And I did that a couple of times, and this fear that I had started to become a powerful feeling. I was taking my narrative back. There were no more wondering if people are whispering in the back, asking, oh, is she not? Is that a boy? I get to have control over my story, and I get to tell people what I want them to know, and I get to keep things private that I would just rather not speak about. And in that, in the way that I made it not such a big deal, it like just kind of eventually wasn't a big deal to anybody. That's just how it was. And I also realized that I was preventing myself from building genuine close friendships before because I had to maintain this certain, como se dice, like persona that was something I thought that everybody wanted from me, as opposed to who I really was. This became a really important lesson to me because I realized in that moment that confidence is like a plant, right? And you gotta feed it. You gotta feed it good things. You don't hide it away. You don't prevent it or try to protect it. You water it, you feed it, you allow it to grow. And it took a while. I think I did have some internalized transphobia where I was ashamed of who I was and I didn't want to participate in it anymore. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to take what made me so different from everybody else, my life experiences, the way I see the world, how I handle people, how I expect people to treat me. And I wanted to erase all of it, all the work that I've put into myself. I wanted to erase it because I wanted people to like me? Because I wanted people to respect me? I realized when I have control of my narrative, that's also controlling who I allow in and out of my life, right? Again, I had this inferiority complex where I felt like every time I met somebody, it was like an interview to show them that I was worthy and that I was good enough to be their friend. And as I started watering my plant of confidence, I realized that I made those decisions. Now I kind of sit back and I listen a little bit more. Are you somebody I want to have in my life? Are you somebody that I think could benefit me? Because I've done the work. I've worked on myself. I've worked so hard to be the woman that I am today that if you ain't an asset, you're just kind of an ass, I just have no use for you. Taking that narrative back for me showed me that I had this confidence that the very thing that I was the most scared of that would make me undesirable or unworthy to anybody from now on is something I wore with pride and I wore with confidence. And at that point, baby, it doesn't get much worse than that. And I think people started to reciprocate that back to me. People kind of understood that this wasn't a weak point for me. This wasn't something that they could jab at in arguments. They couldn't be like, oh, well, you used to be a guy. I'd be like, all right. And you're still mean, so... I also understand that a lot of trans girls want to live this cis fantasy. I think that's fair to an extent, but you have to understand that it's just a fantasy. And when you live in a fantasy, reality always comes back. Whether if you fall into it and you accept it or it hits you hard and it is uncomfortable. The reality is that being a cis woman is not a fantasy, it's a reality for a lot of women. It's a life experience, not your life experience. You get to experience life from a completely different lens. To live vicariously through other people, you're missing what's right in front of you. I found myself being really upset that I was trans sometimes, and then I realized, dude, I have good health. I have, a lot of positive things in my life, and focusing on what I don't have and not practicing mindfulness is just hurting me. I remember I went to New York and I went out to a bar and I met a really nice, fun guy, and I made the decision I was gonna live the fantasy that night. We played beer pong, we had a good time, our humor was on point, and then it got to the end of the night and he asked for my number and I said I needed to use the bathroom and I left because I wasn't gonna ruin the good night I had because I chose to live a fantasy. I'll never know what that could have been, as opposed to if I would have led with that and made the decision, if allowed both of us to make the decision if we wanted to continue seeing each other, it just wasn't worth it for me anymore. So that's the problem with living the fantasy. You always gotta wake up. All right, y'all, if you like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. I post pretty regularly now. What are your guys' ideas? What are your experiences? Are you happier living in your self lifestyle, or do you feel more empowered to be open about your status? Let's talk about it in the comments. Until next week, I'm gonna miss you guys so much.